Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this BELKIN booth event. We're talking about direct SLT. So I'm going to talk to you something around DSLT, direct SLT laser, and how that energy reaches the trabecular meshwork, how it compares to selective laser trabeculoplasty, delivered via a gonioscopy lens in the traditional way, some of the similarities and some of the differences. So we know well and understand very well how traditional established SLT works. The frequency doubled YAG delivers very, very short nanosecond pulses to the trabecular meshwork via a gonioscopy lens and a mirror, and that lens is usually required to sit on the front of the eye, and obviously you use sort of fine bubbles to guide why and how much energy you're delivering, and why we use fine bubbles as an endpoint is something of a moot point. It's very much debated as to whether we need that or not. It was chosen 20 years ago because they thought that that was how much energy you needed, and that's what was showing us we had a tissue response. But there's a lot of information now that suggests that maybe that sort of actual sort of bubble formation is perhaps not necessary. The sort of effects that it's causing in the tissue has been quite well established, both in electron microscopy and on other forms of histology, both in animal models and in post-mortem models from human eyes. And we know that the SLT laser is doing something intrinsically quite different from what the ALT did. So the ALT was causing a very localized burn, and it was thought to cause some sort of contraction in the tissue around that. SLT is devised by Mark Latina over 20 years ago now, is doing something really intrinsically different. So very, very gentle, lower energy densities with very short pulse durations that are stimulating the tissues to change. Now, precisely what those changes are is debated, but it's probably, there's an element of macrophage recruitment into the tissues that's leading to a clearance of blockage, but also longer term than that. There is some speculation around the theoretical division of stem cells in the Schwarbe's line stem cell niche, which is now well established for trabecular meshwork stem cells, both in animal models and non-human primates, but also in humans. And whatever the mechanism of action, we know that selective laser trabeculoplasty works. It has been well established in a large randomized controlled trial that we first published in 2019, and then for the 3-year follow-up and then the 6-year follow-up subsequently, has shown that there's been a significant pressure lowering that extends out to 6 years, particularly as primary treatment. This was a primary treatment study. And it took some time for us to get that study up and running, to collect that data. But now we have firmly established SLT in the position of a potential primary treatment for all new patients, and also as a replacement treatment for patients already on medication. And it's changed the treatment guidelines for the European Glaucoma Society. The National Institute of Clinical Excellence in the UK now mandates that SLT should be offered as first-line treatment to everyone at the time of diagnosis. And we've even changed the American Academy preferred practice pattern, which now says that laser may be used as an additional treatment, but it can also be used as the initial starting place, the primary treatment. Why does it, has it had such an impact on the international guidelines? Because we've achieved 70% of eyes controlled with their glaucoma and drop-free without needing medication. So at 6 years, 70% of eyes treated with laser as their first treatment did not need any medication as a top-up. Some of those required repeat laser. We still had around half of those controlled eyes had only needed one laser throughout the period of their 6-year duration of the study. So this has really, I think, now begun to transform the use of SLT as a primary treatment. But there are still some barriers to its uptake, and there are still patients who are receiving drops as their primary treatment. And I think one of those barriers is the use of gonioscopy. We also showed that not only could we get good pressure control without medication, but there was more disease progression in those eyes that had to use drops. So in the drops first arm, they had worse outcomes in terms of visual fields, objective nerve scan determined progression. They also needed more glaucoma surgery, more trabeculectomies in this case, and then more cataract surgeries. And what was interesting was that starting with laser right at the beginning of their journey over on the left-hand side of this Kaplan-Meier curve, the two treatment arms diverged and continue to diverge even when the medication arm were allowed to have laser. The mechanism of action, there are multiple hypotheses. The short-term duration is the cytokine release and the monocyte macrophage recruitment, which I mentioned at the beginning, and something is permanently changing. And I think what's exciting and what I hope somebody will be able to demonstrate before too long is that we are actually seeing trabecular meshwork stem cell stimulation. That's certainly been shown in some animal models. There are stem cells at the Schwarber's line, reproduction and division, but we've not yet managed to show that in humans. What's different about the DSLT is that we're delivering this laser energy to the same target tissue, but we're aiming to deliver that without a gonioscopy lens. So without all the barriers of partly of patient acceptance of a lens on the eye and the risks of that, but also the barriers, I think, to a lot of individuals, particularly out in comprehensive or general ophthalmological practice, who are perhaps less comfortable with the complexity of gonioscopy usage and delivering laser through that gonio lens. The simplicity of this is hard to appreciate until you've actually seen the laser in use. It's just very, very straightforward. There's automatic focusing and the laser is delivered directly through the limbus as a translimbal laser. So the question that always arises from that is, well, how does the laser energy that's delivered to that target tissue of interest, the trabecular meshwork, how does that compare to something that's gone through the cornea, hit a lens, and then gone through aqueous humor? And there's good evidence from modeling of energy distribution. There's good evidence from energy from tissue models with measurement of energy that the scatter of the DSLT laser through the scleral tissue is such that you're getting a cloud of dispersed energy hitting trabecular meshwork with a slightly higher power delivery at the limbus, but then that transmits through, that is scattered, and you've got quite a wide area of treatment. And it's in the same sort of energy space as standard SLT lens, very different from ALT type power behaviors. So you're not getting thermal reaction, you're still getting that same stimulus to the local tissues. And some of the physics behind that has been published with Michael Belkin in association with other authors, particularly looking at how that incident beam is scattered by the tissue, and then how much of that incident beam is able to penetrate and reach trabecular meshwork. The proof of the pudding, of course, is always in the randomized controlled trial data that was presented earlier this meeting by Professor Peng Kaur, showing that there are comparable outcomes between this DSLT delivery and SLT delivery. But what's exciting is that we can get that energy into the trabecular meshwork tissues without the need for the gonio lens. Now, the calculations become quite technical in exactly how much of that energy is delivered, but essentially there is some scatter and spread even for standard SLT energy because of the use of passage through cornea and aqueous, and there is also some scatter, of course, through sclera from the DSLT energy. What that means is that although there are comparable energy densities and comparable tissue responses, that the DSLT energy reaching the tissue through a different direction is not showing us visible bubbles because we don't have a gonio lens on the eye. But as I said, there's now increasing evidence that that's not a necessary step for the tissue response, and so I don't think that really is an issue for us. What's going to be exciting is that in the next step of SLT evidence base, as Tony Riolini's group have managed to land $15 million from the National Eye Institute and the National Institute of Health in the US to really look at the frequency with which we should be delivering SLT. They're doing both a dose response and a treat and repeat study. The COAST trial is a huge trial. It's going to run for several years. It's not going to report for at least 5 years from now, but I think it's a marker of the interest and the support that SLT laser has from the NEI, which is not famous for doling out money with easily. I think that's going to raise its own issues, because if we do need to treat and repeat on an annual basis, as Tony's suggesting in this trial, how on earth are we going to be able to deliver that with the people that we have available and the lasers we have available? And I think it's going to be interesting to see when that comes online, whether DSLT is able to step into that space and be a much simpler and hopefully similarly effective and similarly safe procedure, as we already know that standard SLT is, but something that's going to be much simpler to deliver, much quicker to deliver, and able to create the same sort of tissue response, but also the same pressure lowering. So thank you very much for your attention for that. I'll direct you to some of the original physics papers that published there. I think they are referenced in the handouts that BELKIN have specifically, which go into some more detail around the calculations and the physics of the laser scatter that reaches the trabecular meshwork. And I'm very happy to take any questions directly now after the presentation, if you've got any questions both about SLT in general or the randomized controlled trial. Thank you very much.